Over the years, marketers have been analyzing the different generations: baby boomers, Gen X, millennials. And recently we have seen there's a red thread among all of them: speed. They all want everything to happen now. My name is Francisco Serrano, and I am the Chief Speed Officer at One to One and the host of the Now Gen podcast. Join me. Each episode, we talk about what's happening with brands, see how brand professionals across different industries cope with this fast-changing market, and live up to the expectation of this now generation. Welcome.
This episode is brought to you by One to One, the fastest day-to-day design and content studio. For more than 17 years, One to One has been their premier partner for many Fortune 500 companies, proving that tight deadlines shouldn't be a hassle.
Hello and welcome to the Now Gen podcast. Hello again. We're going to talk about today about a subject that is relatively new, which is micromobility. What is that? Well, it's any device or any partially or fully motorized low-speed vehicle, whatever, that moves around, that we all see them in big cities lying around, and with different brands across everywhere. And what we're going to talk about is how that industry is influencing the now gen. And to answer all of those questions, I have here Chris Vetrano. He is the partner and customer engagement at Lyft Bike, Scooters, and Transit. Welcome, Chris, to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And hopefully you're not seeing the scooters and bikes lying around in the big cities, but yes, they're hopefully upright and ready to be
used. And I was recently in Europe, and my God, I was looking at people with suits and ties with scooters, and just using them as their form of transportation. And I travel a lot, to New York City, Seattle, and all that, and I see a lot of people using that as their primary. I don't know if their primary form of transportation, but it seems that it's like if it was theirs, right? And when I see them, that they either lay them down or put them there, it's just their transportation. So it's going to be interesting to talk about that subject. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're coming from and how you ended up where you're at, and what exactly are you doing with Lyft?
Sure, yeah. So from a career perspective, it's been all over the map. I started in a social media space. I worked for Village Voice Media and stood up their social media platforms and channels for at the time, 14 markets. I was in Denver at the time where I grew up. And that led me to some other opportunities, one of which was traveling out into Nashville, where I live now. And I, from social media, kind of transitioned as I moved into some live events. We put on a music festival out in Denver, and then being kind of a connoisseur and lover of music, I wanted to continue on down that pathway. And so I made the move to Nashville. I worked in the music industry for about 12 plus years, all in marketing and branding, and then did some artist management. I worked for an online music platform that was kind of like before the days of streaming music, and really got a full kind of fledged end-to-end experience of what's behind the curtain in the music industry. And after, as I said, 12 plus years working in that, never really got time off, didn't really ever get to put sort of my my job to bed. I was kind of always on the clock. And so I started looking for something else. And a friend of mine had reached out and said that Lyft was hiring in Nashville and looking for someone to stand up their social media support. And so through that, I sort of ended up landing at Lyft. Actually, today marks my seventh, what we call Lyft anniversary. So I've been with Lyft officially today for 7 years. And as I said, initially came on, I stood up their social media channels and support for all of our social engagement on Twitter and Facebook, among other kind of like Reddit, other channels and stuff that we would monitor for the rideshare side of the business. And then about 2 to 3 years later, we were looking at expanding into the micromobility space, and they needed somebody that could come in and stand up sort of the end-to-end support experience, customer experience department for what we call Lyft bikes and scooters as the line of business. And so I took on that challenge and have been doing that ever since. We've been kind of all over the place. We launched scooters initially in Denver. Was our first pilot market. And so I had about 2 weeks to kind of figure out like, what are scooters? What are customers going to need? What questions are customers going to have? How do we want to support them? And sort of stood that up pretty rapidly. And then from there, we acquired a company called Motivate, which has 7 bike brands. One that you mentioned in New York City is City Bike, which is pretty recognizable. A lot of people still don't fully know that like Lyft and City Bike are one. And so we operate City Bike in New York, Divvy in Chicago, Bay Wheels in San Francisco, Capital Bike Share in Washington, D.C. So we have a lot of bike brands. And so I've been working with our customers that take all of our bikes and scooter as part of our transportation options in the Lyft platform, and been doing that now for 5+ years from that. So
okay. And before you started it all, was there something, because I forgot exactly when this starts, but was there something, or you guys initiated the scooter, the rental scooter? How was that?
You mean, were there other brands?
Yeah. Were you Lyft was the innovator, or there was already something out there, bits and pieces? I mean, I don't know if even Uber it's a player or not.
Yeah.
And how has that evolved from the beginning till now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the e-scooters were definitely already in existence before
Okay.
Lyft or Bird or Lime or any of these other sort of operators came about. I think that a lot of it was personal transit. So people were buying scooters on Amazon or buying scooters and, bike shops and stuff. And so e-scooters became a thing. And, for Lyft, where our mission is to, provide the world's best transportation, is we saw an opportunity that there's more than just people getting in cars. The irony was this was before the pandemic. And so we didn't realize like actually what the opportunity was there when the pandemic hit, and actually getting in a car with someone you didn't know was going to be a very difficult thing to do during that time. And so we kind of got in at the right time. But there were other players. I mentioned some of them, Bird, Lime.
Okay.
Uber had their version at the time, and Spin is one of the other big ones that we work with. And I think no one really knew at the time. I think especially in the US, we were still sort of figuring it out from a policy perspective and the government regulations. And some markets, like Nashville was one of them, where I think we had like 14 different scooter companies. So you talk about like polluted sidewalks and things like that. It was really kind of crazy in the beginning, and it was kind of a free for all. And now I think the different cities are coming in with various RFPs and awarding permits to the right operators, and we're starting to sort of weed out the folks that really can deliver the best experience and make sure that it's safe and that we have the right operations in place to really run that.
Yeah, because I mean, I've never thought about it that way, but when there's a brand behind it, you really trust that the scooter is not going to just, when you're 20 miles an hour going down the hill or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's different than if you have the mom and pop shop that, the teenager probably build that business and you didn't know anything about that, right? So it all comes through brand. And okay, so let's talk innovation in your industry.
Yeah.
Is it important to innovate? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think like that's the key to sort of winning, right? Is we've got to make sure that we have the right products, we have the right experiences, which is where I come in, and making sure that we're delivering the right kind of customer experience or supporting our customers when things potentially go wrong, so that we win trust. And so I think that there's a lot of innovation just in that in itself. Is, you know, you think about like e-scooters, and a lot of people like don't know how to ride them, and they don't know what happens and how potentially dangerous they could be, if not ridden appropriately and not going through the right education of how to wear helmets, or what to look for, how to use the operation and operate the scooters themselves. And so it's really important that we're providing that sort of end-to-end experience and helping like build that trust with our customer, but also innovating in the way in which we create safety through the vehicles themselves. And so, you know, we just recently, in this last year, launched our first sort of homegrown e-bike at Lyft that we built, which I think is, you know, from what I have heard from our customers, I haven't gotten a chance to actually ride one yet, but they feel extremely safe on it. It's creating a whole new sort of genre for biking. People are saying like, I can get on this bike and it has so much power that I feel like I really never have to get in a car again. And I think like that's the kind of thing that you really want to be innovative around. Is if we're going to solve some of our transportation issues, we have to have something that really truly can replace some of the other alternatives. And so I think that's what we're looking to do.
Great. And I can share my experience that when I was in New York, I wanted to, you know, get to know the Big Apple in a different way, not in, you know, the subway or taking lifts to go from one place to another. And I rented out a bicycle, an e-bike.
Yeah.
And since then, it's been like, I bought one for my house, for myself, and like you said, there's no reason why in the Big Apple for me at least, to go from place to place. In Uber, that you can be stuck in traffic, you cannot turn. If there's even, you have those spaces that you can even move around, and so that's, I can assess personally that it was something that really broke a barrier of my you know, of the way that I see transportation. So
yeah, I mean, there's so few reasons, especially when you're in, you know, specific cities, or when you live in the cities, or potentially live outside of the city in a suburb. Like there's few reasons why you really have to get in a car. And, you know, if we have other means of transportation, I think that in itself is innovative. And how do we want to get there? You know, in Phoenix or in Arizona, you know, people have golf carts and they drive around in golf carts all over, or Florida or wherever, you know, those are really big. And that's like a similar thing, is now that if you can get on an e-bike and go get your groceries, and we have a basket that, you know, is big enough to hold things or get you from point A to point B, then, you know, we're doing our job.
Yeah. And we were talking offline about, you know, this instant gratification era, and that every generation has that, you know, everything they wanted now, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that is a motive and a driver for your customers to engage with your industry in micromobility, or no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you nailed it on the head with like your experience in New York. Is if you get in a car, you're likely going to sit in traffic, especially during, you know, rush hours, or I don't know if that even really is a thing in New York. I feel like it's just constantly rush hour. But yeah, I mean, I think that you're sitting in traffic. And so if you really truly want to up that experience, and you need to be where you want to be now, and you don't want to wait, you know, bike lanes are there for the taking. And, you know, the more that we we as the government and Americans and in our world sort of invests in things like the infrastructure of bike lanes, and doing that, we start to actually provide people more of that instant gratification because we can build bigger bike lanes, which allow more people to do that and do it freely and even faster and all of that.
Yeah. And you earlier, we're as brand marketers, we are constantly trying to innovate, like you were saying, within your unique selling proposition and your identity. And you mentioned this before, it just matches what Lyft is all about, which is finding the best transportation or something along those lines, right? And how do you keep that engagement with the user at that level, because micro mobility, it sounds very individualistic. How do you connect with, is it the same audience that the ones that ask for a car, or is it a different audience? Tell us a little bit, how do you engage with them?
Yeah, I think it really depends on where you are. We have customers all over. In some markets, we don't have a bike or a scooter, but we also have the option in those markets potentially where you can open the Lyft app and take a spin ride, because they may have scooters in those markets. So really what we want, to deliver for our customers is an opportunity to open the Lyft app and find the best option to get you where you want to be. That's not always going to be a ride share. It may also not always be a bike. It might be, the transit system or a bus, or, like I said, like a spin ride. And so I think like those are the things that we want to provide. And as part of that, there's also the option, which you can do in the Lyft app, is you can plan your trip. So you might be able to see that, if I walk 2 blocks, I can get on a scooter, which will take me to this transit, station, which will get me to this point. And at that point, I can request a rideshare ride to pick me up there, and a rideshare ride will take me away.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, so you can do a lot of like trip planning, so you can take multimodal transportation to get where you need to be, all within the Lyft app. And I think so for that, there are customers that use those different modes. And then there are some people who, you mentioned like in Europe, but it happens right here in New York. Like we see people too, like, that bike into work, bike everywhere. They don't own cars. They take City Bike as loyalists to and from work, no matter how dressed up. We actually, I think it was, I can't remember if it was this last summer or the summer before, we had some folks that got married on City Bikes, and they put just married signs on the back, and that's how they kind of like left their ceremony and stuff, is because that's the world. And people that are true loyalists to bikes, they may only bike, but we have other people in other markets who like to do kind of like a mix and match.
Okay. And how do you push this communication to, as a Lyft user? I'm not a heavy user, but as a Lyft, I always first try Lyft just because, I don't know, but it's, how do you push notifications or introduce this new service? Because to tell you the truth, I was not aware that Lyft had such a wide array of, I sometimes when I open the app, I see boop, 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 the logos, and I see the little bikes, especially in New Jersey. But how do you make sure to cross-sell upon the the Lyft users, the car Lyft users, and now the scooters and smaller? How do you make sure that they know that you exist and that they can use it?
Yeah, I think like that's the challenge, right? As I mentioned at the top of the call, like we not everyone even knows that City Bike and Lyft are one sort of like unit, or that you can open the Lyft app and find City Bikes. And so we are still working on sort of transitioning and teaching our customers that we are providing these transportation options in the Lyft app as kind of this one-stop shop. But I think the main place where you see it where you will see it kind of manifest itself is in when you go in to actually request a ride, it should give you the options that are closest to you. So if you're in an area where there are no scooters or there is no transit, it probably won't feed you any kind of like push notification, or it won't feed you any kind of option for that. But if you are, standing in the middle of Manhattan and you open up the Lyft app, you should see like, here's how much it would cost, here's what the transportation options are. It might be cheaper if you walked 4 blocks and then picked this thing up.
Wow.
And so, it gives you those options so that you can kind of see not only what my options to get from point A to point B are, but also sort of what the cost differences are, so that you can kind of pick and choose what works best for you.
Wow, it's amazing. And as you're telling me, I'm trying to think, and from your end, the sophistication you need in order to make that happen, right? From the app, from the e-commerce, and make sure the user experience is there. And is that a challenge for you to? How big of a challenge is it? I'm thinking from another industry, that you offer the service, and the 100% of your services are through e-commerce. You don't have like a point of sale that give me 3 of Lyft's, whatever. You buy them from the web, from internet. How important for you is to have that platform, and what are the key performance indicators for you to know that you're performing in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's incredibly important, because that's what Lyft is it is that platform. It's this transportation platform. I think, to kind of like bring it back into another example, it might be like Google, for example, is when you Google, places to stay in Manhattan, you're going to end up with options that come from Expedia, or options that come from Airbnb, or options that come from Marriott. And you're going to see those things and be able to kind of compare and contrast the things that you might be most drawn to. And so I think that's what we are creating in the Lyft platform, is the option to sort of like say, I need to get to this point, or I need to be at this restaurant by this time. What are my options to get there, and how, what's the price, and what are the, various cars or the various types of transportation that can get me there. So I think it's, that is essentially what the platform is.
Yeah. And when you were talking about how to use and to have the experience that you go, for example, City Bike, or the Capital Bikes, or whatever in DC, are the bikes owned by a third party, and you just are like the marketplace, like you do in the cars, and that's it? Or how does that work?
Yeah, it varies market by market. There are markets where we are not we don't own the system necessarily, but we might provide all of the back-end technology, all the software, and then all of the hardware. And so, as we have all of our options of bikes and scooters and stations and kiosks and all of those things, all of that is our hardware. The back-end systems and infrastructure of the software is ours. So we may operate those things, or we may license those things to various markets, and then we may also give sort of this opportunity to operate in those markets as well. And then there are other markets where we end to end, we are the owner. It is part of, like Denver is a really great example, where the bikes, the scooters, everything in that market is Lyft branded, and it's all of ours, and we operate in that market as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It sure makes sense. And as far as demographics, so when you have a brand, you need your audience, and you say that it's anywhere and anyone and everywhere, but does it have like do you have like a niche, and if you do, which one performs best for this micro mobility industry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly, like if I have a great answer for, do we have a niche audience, because I think the idea is that especially like Lyft as a whole, is like that we have something for everyone. And again, giving you these multimodal options is something that we can, sort of serve the needs of whomever needs to take transportation, which is everyone. Everyone needs to get somewhere at some point. And so that's really who our audience is. I think for the, for the extreme bikers or the people that, don't have cars and take bikes every single day and they're loyalists, like those are the people that we, cater to in, big cities like City Bike, where we want to make sure that we are really like nailing it for them, and that there's bikes where they need them, and that there are bikes when they need to get back from wherever they came from, and making sure that we have a really healthy, rebalanced system so that they can continue to use the platform as intended.
Yeah, because I would imagine, being ignorant of exactly what you're telling me about who's the right target audience, that probably in Denver, people are more healthy oriented type of, and they like to bike more, and you have more bikes than probably in Arizona, I don't know, or scooters are better adapted in cities that are shorter distance because of whatever reason, and then you have to target your audience, and you're not going to promote your services on a senior necessarily with a scooter or a motorbike, but somebody that does not have a license. And that is kind of I see the challenge of trying to make sense of put the product in the right place, right?
Yeah. I think exactly. I think, there is definitely some challenges with trying to potentially like launch in a market where there isn't the infrastructure. Like Nashville is a really good example where, Lyft doesn't operate in Nashville today, but I can speak to like the competitors. Is like I said, at one point there was like 14 different scooter operators here in the city. And now I think it's like, much less. I really only see like a handful of them now when I go out. But that also is because the city has not invested in the infrastructure to support micromobility. Our streets are, for the most part, one lane. If that, most of them are covered with, cars end to end on the sides of the street. And so there aren't bike lanes. There's not like really well-oiled, whereas in Denver, as you mentioned, like not only is the city healthier, but they also promote that for their communities. And so when you go to Denver, there's really wide bike lanes, and the bike lanes are really protected and prominent. And so I think like those are some of the things where where I think we have to really be cautious of, not just of Lyft, but if we're going to continue to invest, we have to be thinking about how do we build our cities around the infrastructure and things for this kind of transportation to exist.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Great insights there. What are your challenges, Chris, coming into 2023 that you have for the brand, and for how to what are your goals?
Yeah, so from the customer experience standpoint, our biggest sort of challenge that we're trying to bite off right now is, pre-pandemic, we were really focused on, delivering as much support and through automation or within the app, or through, faster kind of real-time channels like chat, and making sure that we were available to assess our customers' needs as they came up. What we're learning though through the pandemic is that people are even like demanding to be even faster than chat, or definitely faster than an email channel. And so we want to make sure that we give our customers the option to get in touch with us as quickly as they prefer to. And one thing that especially in the customer experience field, we focus on a KPI around like average handle times, and how long are phone calls, how long does it take for an average ticket to be resolved for a customer. And as we look towards the future, we're thinking less about that and thinking more about how are we actually resolving these issues, because that's truly what our customers need right now. And that might be that we get on the phone with them because we realize in a chat session or an email that they're not understanding how to dock the bike correctly, or they're not understanding, why they were assessed a certain fee or whatever it may be. And so it might just be the right thing for us to pick up the phone and call the customer and try to help them. And so I think really trying to figure out how to, create this world-class experience for our customers in this state of now, as you call it, of like where everyone needs their answers now. They want to like be able to move on and try to cater to that and give that to them in a way that is meaningful, but also at scale for us as a business.
Right. I can imagine that is just depending that the success of the next purchase comes at the end of the last, meaning that if you're not satisfied with how the experience went at that moment, then your chances are going to be more, less likely to happen in the next segment. As the other way around, if your experience to reach out to Lyft and say, hey, listen, I am in control of this, well, it resonates with a lot of the folks talking about their brands and their challenges that they have. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Before moving to our final segment, is there anything, Chris, that you would like to share that we've been speaking about here in this half an hour about what is the key takeaway for somebody that's listening to you right now and nurturing your experience and they own a brand or they have challenges? What is the takeaway that you would like to give us?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all I think this sounds cliche, but it's where my head immediately goes, is like, we're all in this together. We all just went through and not just, us as, US citizens, but us as a globe went through this global pandemic together. We all had to isolate. We all had to change our certain lifestyles in various ways. We've all potentially lost people. We've all been through this together. And so we're all experiencing hardship. And so I think that everyone's experiencing challenges. Not only that, potentially, up against a recession, up against kind of what might be on the horizon as well. And so we have to remember to be empathetic with that. And I think sometimes because we live in this fast-paced world where we demand that everything have its answers now, we lose our empathy at times. And so I think that's something that I try to, speak about regularly, but also instill into all of my team members and our agents that are on the phones with our customers, is like, they're upset, but let's try to empathize with them, because they might be really frustrated about what's going on in the world right now. They might be feeling something that we can at least tap into to try to help them along the way. And one of the things that comes to mind is an example of, going into a restaurant and seeing like maybe your favorite restaurant that you've been to a million times, and you bring your friends and you're expecting this like world-class experience that you've had and in the past, and that day it just didn't live up to that hype. And I think like we see that so much now, and you can get really frustrated, like, this wasn't right, and why is the server so slow, and why is this thing happening, and why did the food come out cold? And when you kind of like peek behind the curtain, you say like, well, that server's got, 3 times the amount of tables that they used to work. There's less people in the kitchen because they have a now hiring sign on their door. And, when you start to like really start to think about what challenges that business is facing, you might be able to approach it a little bit more empathetically. And I think, in a world where we cater to the now and cater to the fast, I think we are needing to force ourselves to sort of take a step back and slow down and allow for a little bit more margin of error as we sort of like rebound and recover from all of what we just went through.
I completely agree, Chris. I mean, you need to watch your words and watch how you control the expectations of the other person as a brand too, because if you have high expectation of your customer and you're not fulfilling them for whatever reason, they understand, and you need to understand them, that probably they're going through a phase, and the important things is the empathy, like you mentioned, the empathy of how you're going to manage that situation. It also applies to a brand and the interactions you have with consumers. So thank you for sharing that, Chris. Okay, so the last section of the interview is, we want to know what a rock star like you has a brand in breakfast. Tell us a brand you love for breakfast and why.
Like a breakfast brand.
Yeah, it doesn't matter just what you use. It can be cereal, can be yogurt, can be whatever. And why is it? Did you like about that brand?
Yeah. I guess I was trying to think of like, oh gosh,
Oh, maybe you don't have breakfast, and I the wrong.
well, that's sometimes the problem, is that I'm more of like a coffee person and then wait for lunch. But I think one, and this is going to probably not be like a brand that a lot of your listeners will probably know, but a good handful might, is there's a restaurant called Snooze. And or I think it's called Snooze AM Eatery, but it originated in Denver, and when I was in college, it was kind of all the craze. It was like this little hole in the wall downtown Denver. We would wait like 3 hours just to get in to have like the best pancakes and hash browns that they've ever had, or that you've ever had, and it was, they had like a really cool kind of retro feel inside. They just like really did it well. And over the course of the many years that it's been since I was in college, I won't say how many, but that brand has now expanded. They have franchises kind of all over, and they recently just opened one here in Nashville. And I went and I was like, this is going to probably not live up to my expectations, because I have built up this experience that I used to have in my head. And I mean, everything was exactly the same. The way that the service is, and I just talked about, what we're going through in the world, and restaurants really are struggling right now to get like good people, and you don't always have a memorable experience. And somehow it must be through their training or through the ways in which they've sort of set up this brand. I felt like I was sitting back in college. I didn't have to wait 3 hours, luckily, but I was able to get in. But I had that same exact kind of feeling, the same experience. The pancakes, the pineapple upside down pancakes were still the exact same as I remembered them, and that's something that is just so memorable for me. And so, from a breakfast perspective, I've been spending a lot of time, especially on the weekends, at Snooze here in Nashville, because it makes me feel nostalgic, and it's kind of my go-to now.
Yeah, well, exciting that it really resonates. The user experience challenge you have coming up in 2023, and the top of mind you had from the brand of the restaurant back in Denver, and your experience was good. The empathy is there. So all the different aspects of the conversation we had, they're there. So it's just it resonates with everything. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. Where can people reach out to you in case they want to after listening to this podcast?
Sure. I'm CM Vetrano, Vetrano, on pretty much all the social platforms. So happy to chat with anyone or connect with anyone there. And then on LinkedIn, that's a great place to find me too. I'm pretty active on that as a social platform today. So, and it's Chris Vetrano, and you'll probably, I don't know if there's a lot of us, so you'll be able to find me. But I'm
there's a lot of us.
The one that has
LinkedIn, is it LinkedIn a good way to find out if you're there? LinkedIn?
Yep. And there's a bike, scooter, and a transit emoji in my bio. So you'll know.
There you go. Feeling everything about the brand. That's good. Yeah. That's always good. Thank you so much, Chris, for being here today. We've been talking to Chris Vetrano, the partner and customer engagement at Lyft Bikes, Scooters, and Transit. Thank you, Chris. And remember, if you want to learn more about the most relevant brands and what are they doing to face this challenging new era of the now gen. Please stay tuned to the next episode. Thank you so much for being here today, Chris. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.